You ever have one of those days where someone asks, "How are you?" and you say, "I'm fine," but what you really want to say is, "I'm falling apart, actually. Thanks for asking." Yeah, me too. And here's the thing, we get really good at pretending we're fine. We smile, we power through, we show up, but every time we fake our way through pain, stress, or fear, it costs us something. Not just emotionally, but physically, spiritually. It's like making tiny withdrawals from an emotional bank account we never deposit into. And one day we're overdrawn, numb, exhausted. So today I want to talk about what it really costs us when we pretend to be okay, and what it could look like if we chose to show up differently. Emotional suppression is a short-term strategy with long-term consequences. We all do it. You get hit with something heavy, an argument with someone you love, a wave of anxiety that shows up out of nowhere, a deep sadness that has no clean label. And instead of sitting with it, you push it down. You tuck it neatly under your to-do list, cover it with a smile, and keep moving because you've got responsibilities, right? People counting on you. No time to fall apart. But here's the truth. Those emotions we try to outrun, they don't evaporate. They don't vanish just because we decide to ignore them. They wait. And when they're not processed, they don't just go dormant. They go underground. They get stored in our bodies, in our muscles, our hearts, our sleep patterns, our relationships. There's a study from the University of Texas that found suppressing emotions doesn't reduce their intensity. It actually increases physiological arousal. So while you're telling yourself, "I'm fine," your heart rate is climbing, your blood pressure is rising, and your body is quietly moving into fight or flight. In other words, pretending you're fine doesn't calm the storm. It just buries it, and your body still gets soaked. And we've gotten good at justifying it. We say it's not that big of a deal, or I don't have the right to complain, or other people have it worse. But pain doesn't compete. Hurt is hurt. And when we tell ourselves that our emotions are inconvenient or unworthy, what we're really saying is, I don't matter. Now, I'm not talking about being consumed by emotions 24/7 or falling apart every time something hard happens. What I am saying is that if our only coping tool is to stuff everything down and power through, eventually we hit a wall, a big one. Because here's what happens over time. That constant suppression creates emotional fatigue. We become numb, not just to pain, but to joy too. Our bodies stay in a low-grade stress state that never really turns off. We start snapping at people we love. Our sleep gets worse. Our capacity to focus shrinks. We feel disconnected, restless, and somehow flat. And the irony is, we often suppress emotions because we think it will help us function better. We tell ourselves, if I just hold it together a little longer, I'll be okay. But long term, it makes us less resilient, less grounded, less present. One of the most damaging things we can do is treat our emotions like inconveniences or threats. Emotions are messengers. They're data. Fear says something matters to you. Sadness says you've lost something. Anger says something's not okay. When we ignore that data, we lose access to our internal compass. And the scariest part, when we habitually suppress, it becomes normal. We stop noticing that we're not okay. We adapt to stress and pain like it's just part of the background noise. And by the time we realize we're drowning, we're already in deep. The first step toward healing isn't fixing everything. It's simply allowing yourself to feel, just enough to recognize what's really going on. To say, this hurts, or I'm scared, or I need help. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Because pretending you're fine might help you survive the moment, but honesty is what helps you heal in the long run. Disconnection from ourselves and others. When we pretend, we build walls, first around our feelings, then around the people closest to us. And the tricky part is, it doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. It starts with a quiet decision not to share what's really going on. You tell yourself, this isn't the time, or they wouldn't understand, or I don't want to be a burden. So you smile, you nod, you say you're good, and you keep it moving. But each time you do that, each time you minimize your truth, you step just a little further away from yourself. And when you step away from yourself, you start losing the ability to show up fully with others. Here's what I've seen over and over in the research and in real life. Connection can't happen without honesty. And I'm not talking about dramatic oversharing or making everything into a confession. I mean emotional honesty, the kind that says, I'm not fine today, and that's okay. Or I'm feeling disconnected, and I don't know why. That level of realness is the foundation of genuine connection. But when we get in the habit of pretending we're okay, we become performers. And even if we have a crowd, it still feels like we're on stage, applauded, maybe, but not seen, not really. There's this heartbreaking paradox that shows up in a lot of people's lives. They're surrounded by others, at work, at home, on social media, but they feel completely alone. And most of the time, it's not because there's no one around who cares. It's because they've trained themselves not to be known. And we cannot feel loved if we're not willing to be seen. One of the most painful patterns I see is how this disconnection shows up in relationships. Partners, friends, even close family members. People who genuinely love each other. But the connection starts to erode because no one's being real anymore. We tiptoe around the hard stuff. We answer fine when we're anything but. We think protecting each other from our messy emotions is kindness, but it's actually a form of distancing. And let's talk about self-disconnection for a second. Because it's not just about our relationships with others. The more we push down our real feelings, the harder it becomes to recognize our own needs. We stop checking in with ourselves. We lose touch with what we enjoy, what we dream about, even what we believe. Instead of being aligned with who we really are, we live according to what we think we're supposed to be. And that's a lonely place to live. The truth is, connection isn't built on perfection. It's built on presence, on someone saying, I see you, all of you. But that kind of intimacy requires us to first be willing to show all of us, or at least enough to be known. There's real power in saying, I'm struggling, or this is hard, not because you want someone to fix it, but because you're choosing to stay tethered to your own truth, because you're choosing to stay connected first to yourself and then to the people who truly want to love the real you. And that's the thing about pretending. It might keep the peace on the outside, but it creates war on the inside. And eventually something breaks. Perfectionism is not a coping mechanism, it's armor. I used to wear perfectionism like a badge of honor. Maybe you have too. You know the feeling. You walk into a room or show up to a meeting or send the email, and there's this voice in your head that says, don't mess this up. Make it flawless. If you do it perfectly, no one can judge you, no one can hurt you. But here's the raw truth. Perfectionism doesn't protect us. It isolates us. It's not a strategy for excellence. It's a defense mechanism for shame. Perfectionism shows up as this belief that if we perform perfectly, look perfect, appear unbothered, then maybe, just maybe, we'll be safe. It's rooted in fear of criticism, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. We don't strive for perfect because we're confident. We strive for perfect because we're terrified that if we're seen as anything less than, we'll be unworthy of love, respect, or belonging. And what I've found again and again in both the research and real conversations is that perfectionism is exhausting. It doesn't offer peace. It offers constant anxiety. It's the belief that no matter what you do, it's never quite enough. There's always a voice saying, you should have done more, or that wasn't good enough, or if they really knew you, they'd walk away. And when that becomes your inner dialogue, it changes everything. You stop taking risks because failure would be unbearable. You stop asking for help because vulnerability feels like weakness. You stop showing people the real you because the real you feels like a gamble. What's worse is how perfectionism gets rewarded. You meet deadlines, you exceed expectations, you become the reliable one, the high achiever, but no one sees what it's costing you. No one sees the spiral of overthinking at night, the burnout creeping in, the deep fear of disappointing anyone, ever. And because you're so good at keeping it together, people assume you're fine. You've trained them to expect nothing less. But inside, you're tired. You're overwhelmed. You've spent so long curating this polished version of yourself that you've lost touch with a part of you that doesn't need to prove anything. And here's something I've come to understand the hard way. Perfectionism doesn't just keep out judgment, it also keeps out connection. When we project this image of always being okay, always having the answer, always being strong, we rob people of the chance to really know us. We block empathy, we block authenticity, we block love, because love doesn't require perfection, it requires presence. When you live in the armor of perfectionism, you live your life performing rather than living. And performances don't lead to belonging, they lead to applause, maybe, but not intimacy. So if you're constantly chasing the ideal version of yourself, constantly adjusting and editing who you are to meet what you think others expect, just know this: the people who truly love you aren't looking for perfection, they're looking for you. The real you, the messy, courageous, unfinished version of you. And the moment you start to believe that your worth is not on the other side of achievement, but rooted in your inherent humanity, that's when the armor starts to fall away. That's when you start to breathe again. Emotional honesty isn't weakness, it's clarity and courage. Somewhere along the way, many of us were taught that being emotional, especially in public, is messy, unprofessional, or even dangerous. We were told things like, don't cry, keep it together, be strong. And so we learned early on that vulnerability was something to avoid, that being emotional was a liability. But here's the problem with that lesson. When we equate emotional honesty with weakness, we end up hiding the very parts of ourselves that make us real, trustworthy, and connected. Let me say this plainly. Emotional honesty is not falling apart at every turn. It's not spilling your guts to everyone you meet. It's not drama. Emotional honesty is the quiet, grounded practice of telling the truth about what you feel and why. It's saying, I'm overwhelmed right now, instead of pretending you're in control. It's that hurt instead of laughing it off. It's I need a minute, rather than bulldozing through your day like your insides aren't screaming for pause. And it takes real courage. Because telling the truth about how we feel, especially in a culture that rewards composure over connection, is one of the most vulnerable things we can do. But it's also where clarity begins. When we start naming our emotions instead of numbing them, when we get curious instead of judgmental, we start to make sense of our own stories. There's research out of UCLA that shows simply labeling an emotion, putting words to what we're feeling, reduces activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain that responds to fear and threat. Just naming your emotion can calm your nervous system. That's powerful, because when we avoid our feelings, they get louder, but when we acknowledge them, they soften. We live in a time where we're bombarded with messages to stay positive, look on the bright side, or keep grinding. And listen, optimism and perseverance are important, but bypassing your feelings in the name of positivity doesn't build resilience. It builds shame. Because when you're hurting and everyone around you is saying, just be grateful, you start to believe there's something wrong with you for struggling. Emotional honesty gives us permission to say, I'm grateful and I'm hurting, and I'm showing up and I'm scared. We can't selectively numb emotions. When we shut down fear, sadness, anger, we also dull joy, love, wonder. Emotional honesty keeps us open to the full spectrum of being human. It helps us access empathy for ourselves and for others. And it teaches the people around us that they don't have to perform their worth either. They can just be. And yes, emotional honesty might feel uncomfortable at first. But discomfort isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's often a sign you're doing something brave. So the next time you're tempted to say, I'm fine, when you're anything but, pause, take a breath, ask yourself, what's true for me right now? And whatever the answer is, let that be okay. Because truth builds trust with others, yes, but especially with yourself. Sustainable healing starts with telling the truth, even when your voice shakes. We love the idea of healing as this beautiful, serene process. Soft lighting, calm music, warm tea, quiet breakthroughs. And sometimes it is, but more often healing is messy. It's uncomfortable. It's sitting with the truth you've been running from and choosing again and again, not to numb it, not to hide it, but to face it. And here's what I know for sure. We can't heal from what we won't name. We can't release what we continue to suppress. As long as we're pretending everything is fine, we're essentially telling ourselves that our pain doesn't matter, that our experience isn't valid, that our truth isn't worth speaking out loud. And that message, it doesn't just silence your voice, it erodes your sense of self-worth from the inside out. Healing requires honesty, and not just the kind you whisper to a therapist behind closed doors, though that matters deeply. It also requires the honesty you practice in your daily life, with your partner, with your friends, with your coworkers, with yourself. It's the courage to say, this is still tender for me, or I'm not over that yet, or even just, I'm still figuring this out. The stories we don't own begin to own us. And when we silence those stories, we don't get to control how they shape our lives. They shape them anyway. In the background, in our relationships, in our choices, in our health, the unspoken emotions don't just go away, they go inward. And that's where the real emotional cost starts to pile up. When we pretend we're fine, we deny ourselves the gift of being fully seen. And healing needs to be witnessed. That doesn't mean everyone deserves access to your deepest wounds, but it does mean that someone, a trusted person, or maybe even just you with a pen and paper, gets to hear the truth, gets to sit with it, gets to hold space for it without trying to fix it or shrink it or pretty it up. Sometimes healing starts with something as simple as saying, I'm not okay. It's not dramatic, it's not a breakdown, it's a declaration that you are choosing to honor what's real instead of continuing the performance. That kind of honesty might feel terrifying in the moment, but it's how we begin to breathe again. It's how we reclaim our power. One of the most powerful shifts I've ever experienced is moving from asking, what's wrong with me, to asking, what happened to me? That reframing opens the door to compassion. It changes the story from one of shame to one of understanding. And understanding is the seed of healing. We don't need to be fully healed to be whole. We don't need to have it all figured out to start telling the truth. In fact, the healing often begins because we start telling the truth. Even if our voice shakes, even if it's messy, even if we're not sure what comes next, because the moment we stop pretending and start honoring our story, that's when we begin to return to ourselves. And that's when real healing can begin. So here we are. We've talked about the silent weight of pretending you're fine, the smile you force, the pain you bury, the mask you wear just to make it through the day. We've walked through the emotional toll of hiding your struggles, the armor of perfectionism, the courage it takes to speak your truth, and the deep soul-level healing that begins the moment you stop performing and start showing up as you, messy, honest, beautiful you. If there's one thing I hope you carry with you, it's this. You are not broken for having hard days. You are not weak for feeling deeply. You are not too much, and you are absolutely not alone. You are human, And being human means learning how to hold joy and pain in the same hands, to ask for help when you're drowning, and to trust that your truth, unfiltered, unedited, is worthy of being seen and heard. The world does not need a more perfect version of you. It needs the real you, the one who's tired but still showing up, the one who's scared but still speaking, the one who's healing slowly in small, brave steps. You don't have to keep pretending you're fine. You're allowed to take the mask off. You're allowed to say this is hard. You're allowed to tell the truth. And the beautiful part is when you do, you give others permission to do the same. So wherever you are in your story, however you're feeling today, know this: you are worthy of rest. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of your truth. And the moment you stop pretending is the moment you start coming home to yourself. Good luck out there. Be brave, be kind to yourself, and keep going. You're doing better than you think.